Actually, I was seeing a friend that was actually doing a Cole Porter review in North Beach. And I was walking back, and the Weirdos from Los Angeles were playing in the Mabuhay Gardens. So I went in and saw them, and the little hair on the back of my neck stood on end. So it was like, wow, this is what I want to do.
After going to the Mabuhay a couple of times with cohorts from Bank of America to sort of laugh at the punks, I started moving away from their chair up to the front rows and going, well, what are these guys, the Zeros, doing anyhow? I like, and this negative trend group is really cool and stuff like that. And I want to do that.
So I put an ad in the paper and put an ad up in Aquarius Records. And then Klaus, I saw the ad in the paper, and Biafra saw the ad in Aquarius Records.
Now, BAM was the least likely place to look. If I knew anything about the scene at that point, I would have gone to Aquarius Records, which was the record store, or I would have looked maybe, I don't know if Search and Destroy ran ads in the back or not. I don't think they did, but something like that, would have been a fanzine or something like that. But I didn't know anything about the scene, and I just wanted to be involved in it.
Klaus Fluoride named me East Bay Ray. What happened, the ad in the paper, it was blah, 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 and I was trying to tell the geographical location that I was based in, and then it went East Bay, and then there was a space and Ray, and then my phone number.
And so I didn't know when I called up to ask for East Bay or Ray, because I hadn't lived in San Francisco long enough to really know that East Bay was a part of San Francisco. I'd never really caught, because I'm oblivious sometimes. So I called him up and asked him, and he said, well, come on out and, try out. And so that was it. I tried out for this band. Before we, about a year and a half before we did this product. You see, here it is. It's flavorific. In order to get booked at the Mabuhay, you had to have a demo tape and a picture.
So the offs wanted us to play, and Dirk Dirksen and the Mabuhay was requiring a photo and stuff. We didn't actually have a drummer at the time.
We tried out a bunch of different drummers. And there was one guy who could drum really well. And Ray taped all the auditions so we could listen to them later. And he had a fairly good, Ray knew how to record stuff way back when. So we had a fairly good tape of us playing the songs with the best drummer we'd played with so far, who wasn't going to be in the group.
A friend of ours that we knew from the scene came in, and we did a photo shoot, so there'd be 4 people.
So we had a demo tape, and to pose for the drummer, we asked 6025 if he would, who wasn't called 6025 at that point.
Then he wasn't in the band, but he joined soon after to be the other guitar player.
And Kareen came down and took pictures of us at the Embarcadero BART station. That's the first photo session we did, with 6025 posing as our drummer. So when we gave Dirk this tape, and then he said, okay, I'll book you in 2 weeks. You're on in 2 weeks on Thursday night. There's 8 people on the bill, and 7 bands on the bill, and you'll be the 8th. And it was like with DV8 and the offs and all this sort of stuff.
We got Ted like a week before the show.
He was the first drummer that came by that actually rushed us with the songs instead of trying to drag behind everything. And we played 2 songs with him where he picked it up just like that. He had the feel for what we were doing right away. As soon as we'd start playing a song, he'd play it and start rushing us, and I just offered him the beer of choice for Dead Kennedys at that point, because it was $1 for a 6-pack, I believe, was Regal Select. And offered him a beer and said, want to be in the band? And he said, sure, and that was it. And like within a week later, we were playing with him at the Mabuhay, and that was our first gig. And we had a 20-minute set, I think, or something like that, went by in 12 minutes, just because we were all so wired out of our gills. Dirk is the first person to give us a show. And Dirk Dirksen from the Mabuhay.
What really made you decide to put them on stage?
Lack of taste, suicidal tendencies, suffering from depression at the time, and just dumb luck.
He was one of the first people who gave us credit for being something that was not going to be just a flash in the pan. I mean, after 3 or 4 shows and it getting more and more crazy, Dirk brought us in. And I mean, he had actually took us into his office and talked to us about it.
I don't even know that conversation occurred. I have people calling me in the middle of the night and say, "Hey, Dirk, do you remember me? Jay, you told me one time, and God, it's amazing. I was just one loudmouth that wouldn't shut up. Just diarrhea mouth Dirksen is what I would call myself." Yep.
The fact is that he made us think about where we were going. This song, Forward to Death. What's your name again? 6025? What is it about? I mean, isn't it rather negative? Well, it's just that I am looking forward to death, sir. Well, okay, then if you want, if you feel it that way, sing about it.
I mean, back in the day, it was great because there would be like a punk band like us, and there'd be an art band from San Francisco Art Institute or the Art Institute here in Oakland, and there'd be a pop band like the Ready Maids.
There were lots of interesting individuals exploring their mind's eye picture, and some succeeded and some didn't.
And they would all play on the same bill, and plus they'd all draw different people, and there'd be kind of this old, Paris salon effect of people with different backgrounds talking about the same thing but having different viewpoint on it. Now is really the golden age of that music scene, because that's when people cross-pollinated. We wanted to put out a 7-inch single first, and we recorded California Uber Alles and Man with the Dogs, and we did it in a kind of a basement studio on 8-track, and it took us like 1 day to record the tracks, but then it took us like 3 weeks to mix it, and that's where I really learned kind of the mix punk rock. It's kind of hard to have that because the guitar's mid-rangey, the voice is mid-rangey, and the snare drum is mid-rangey. It's hard to all fit them in there. So it's funny, it's like it took 3 hours to record the song and about 30 hours to mix it. I just kept going back, and the rest of the band, we all listened to it and fixed it.
I mean, it was very grassroots at that point. Like I said, sitting around a living room, stuffing records into sleeves, and putting them in boxes so we could drive them around town and drop them off at record stores and beg people to take them on consignment or whatever, and handing them out to people to listen to. It's very much at the beginning.
Selling 6,000 out of the back of your car is really, really, really good. And so we were started at the bottom of the bill and we're working our way up. And plus, we sounded good and we had a good performance. It was fun to watch.
I mean, at the time they were dangerous. They were out there. They weren't slick. I mean, they were, one of the most outrageous bands around. The name sounded dangerous. You went to a show, you didn't know if you're going to get beat up in the mosh pit or beat up by the cops afterwards.
I remember hearing California Uber Alles on college radio and being impressed. I liked it. I liked the idea that it had that the flamenco chord progression in a punk rock song. And I liked the beat. I just thought it was a very clever record.
The bass playing really stands out, particularly in California Uber Alles, because it sets that dark tone for the rest of the song. And again, it feels like it also has a surfy vibe to it.
It got that kind of Wagner bolero thing. North Europe meets South Europe meets West California.
Jerry Brown at the time, he was like one of the coolest politicians around. He dated Linda Ronstadt when she wore cutoffs, and she was hot wearing cutoffs and roller skates, and he was, you know, he was a hip guy. And then you have Jello, you know, taking the piss out of the guy.
I think it was a little misguided because you look back at the Jerry Brown suede and denim Secret Police, and that looks pretty good compared to Arnold Schwarzenegger and George Bush and what's come since then. I mean, Jerry Brown looks like the golden age.
In fact, when you think of California Uber Alice, the subtext is that Jerry Brown was a hippie fascist. Okay, he was going to make you wear earth shoes and eat granola and stuff like that, because he's the kind of guy that might have a yoga mat in his office or some such bullshit. I think it was hilarious. They're bitching about Jerry Brown. Brown replaced Ronald Reagan. I mean, like, why are you complaining? Like, what's wrong with you? You should be happy with what you have.
Biafra had this anti-hippie, what do they call it, organic decadence thing, and that's kind of why California Uber Alice was like that. But we were not a pro-Reagan band.
had the burning cop cars, the burning black and whites from the White Night, from when Dan White got acquitted, basically. I mean, he didn't get acquitted, but he got off for murdering in cold blood, 2 people, because one was gay, basically, and he had the Twinkie defense and all that miserable stuff, and people went berserk, and so that was what we used for the front cover, which was, by the way, supposed to be the color that it is now on this release. We asked them to make the flames look like fire. And the very first cover, which is really hard to find now, came out painted orange on white.
Biafra was furious, circus colors on my record, how dare they, and by every right, people trying to make them any more digestible, that's the last thing they wanted to be.
So that was like our first heart attack about releasing our first LP and having it totally back asswards from what we intended.
Some promoter guy said, come to New York and play. And so we bought plane tickets and went to New York and lost our shirt, because nobody knew us in New York.
California Uber Alice had come out in California, but it hadn't gotten out there yet. And we were playing to 6 or 7 people sometimes. And the logic there was, you can either be really depressed or figure there's 6 or 7 people who have heard about us, or were at least interested enough to come out to the club to see us, and we'll play our frickin' ass off to them.
We also went to Boston and we played the Rat, which is the famous underground club in Kenmore Square.
And I think there were about 50 or 60 people there. I was there. And Jello Biafra was doing his thing, trying to wind people up. I don't think he understood that in Boston, it's really hard to wind up an audience, unless you're a local and you understand how Bostonians think.
And the first set, everybody just sat there and stared. And so the second set, he ran around and shook things up by pouring pitchers of beer, basically, on the customers.
And he kicked the beer off the table of this little girl, like Trudy. She was in that band Bound and Gagged. And Trudy kicked the crap out of him. Trudy was a tough little girl, and she beat the shit out of him.
And then everybody went to the walls, but they didn't leave the room, but they went to the walls.
In the second set, the waitress took part of the show by taking a pitcher of beer and pouring it on Biafra. And that was cool. That was just like exactly what needed to be done. That was the kind of thing that we like to do, is, again, it was break down the barrier between the audience and at the same time not do what they expected. And Biafra had a lot of that, a focus on that. came back really deflated and sort of thinking, you know, this just ain't happening. And then around that time is when Biafra decided to run for mayor.
We go to the party, we go to the game, we go and get the disco, ain't gonna cruise out, man. Stealing people's mail, stealing people's mail.
I remember having a conversation, it was actually in my room at the flat, where, you know, Biafra was kind of half kidding about, you know, running for mayor, and there was a big mayoral campaign coming up. This is shortly after the Moscone was killed.
I think we were watching Pure Ubu. I think it was a Pure Ubu show at the Waldorf. Ted was there and Biafra was there. Biafra was going on and on about something with politics and Dianne Feinstein and something like that. And Ted said, Biafra, you know so much, why don't you run for mayor? You know, you got such a big mouth. And Biafra just started the wheels turning.
And I said, you know, go for it. And I was kind of kidding too. I mean, you know, we weren't really thinking about it in terms of any real seriousness, but it kind of went from there. And I think I even said, you know, I'll be your manager or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so he decided, you know, he put his hat in the ring and decided to run for mayor. And
all I can say is watch out. This guy's running for mayor.
His fiancée on his arm and wearing his campaign wardrobe, a $7 suit from a Geary Street pawn shop, plus shoes a friend gave him for formal occasions. They're serviceable but a bit large, Biafra says. The candidate, who won't tell his born name, would be a joke, except he's too smart.
I didn't imagine, you know, us little punkers could really move and shake the city, but, you know, we did what we did. We did throw him into a runoff.
I'm not running on my my qualifications of 20 years in government, 20 years of this. I'm running on my views. And some of the views, which you'll probably get to in a minute, are tongue-in-cheek as such, but there are very serious feelings behind them.
He wants to tear down Pier 39. He wants to ban all cars from the city and encourage bicycling. And he thinks all the police should have to run for office every 4 years. To relieve tension, he would put up Dan White statues all over town so the public can throw eggs at them. The eggs would be sold by the park department.
One thing I intend to do, though, is bring government out from behind closed doors by auctioning off all high city positions by the Civic Center fountain rather than public deals or private deals behind the public's back like we have now.
As manager, I wasn't really manager as much as Dirksen was. Dirksen really took this thing and ran with it in terms of the publicity and what have you. We did the whistle stop tour. We got on the BART trains, the rapid transit trains, and jumped out at each stop. I had these signs, and we'd make all this noise, and we'd jump back on the next train, and we ended up at City Hall. And I don't remember all the signs, but I know at one point I had one that says, if he doesn't win, I'll kill myself, you know. And there we are on the steps of City Hall as, you know, all the politicians and lawyers and everybody's coming and going. Great fun. I mean, it was great fun.
Jello Biafra, the lead singer in the punk rock group The Dead Kennedys, he held a news conference at City Hall. He then went on to do what he calls shaking babies and kissing hands. He also went on a whistle-stop tour through parts of San Francisco today on a BART train. No telling how he'll do in the elections, but his philosophy is summed up in his campaign slogan, "There's always room for Jello."
Bill Gilliam was our manager in the UK and ended up being the UK manager of Alternative Tentacles for a while, which was when it was Alternative Tentacles UK.
Bill Gilliam called up and said, why don't you come over and tour the United Kingdom? And we said, sure. And we said, go check it out. And then he called back, well, you know, you can't really tour on just having a single out. How about if I find you financing to make a full-length record?
Rang me, he said, my partner, and this partner is called Bill Gilliam, has just taken over the European management of a band called Dead Kennedys, and they want to make an album. Would you be interested in talking to them? And of course I was aware of Dead Kennedys' single, California Uber Alice. So I went up for a meeting in Bayswater and met Bill Gilliam, and he told me basically what the band wanted.
So Ian McNay decided to finance Fresh Fruit. And so I shopped around for studios in San Francisco and picked Mobius Music.
We finally got to Oliver's studio called Mobius Music, Oliver DeChico. And he reined us in lots of ways and would let us go crazy in lots of ways. And it was a real studio that had, you know, a big old 24-track machine or a 16-track machine or something like that, and baffling on the walls, and it was California woody sort of construction. And
well, Oliver's studio was basically just one room, and so we would set up in the room, and what you do is you record what are called the basic tracks. And what your goal is in the basic tracks is to try to get a good drum track with the tempo and the feel of it, and a good bass track.
I think that's pretty much how we did it. I know that the band definitely, you know, they played together, and that was part of, you know, that's how you got the energy. You weren't going to sit there and overdub, you know, build that up from the drum track and a click track with the Kennedys. That wasn't how the music was made.
Biafra would do what was called a scratch vocal, and I would be doing it with a scratch guitar that we may or may not take. The important point is whether the drums and bass, we had to keep recording until that was right. And if it happened that my guitar part was good, we just leave it, or I would redo it.
I remember like little weird things, you know, like Biafra obsessing about his vocals, you know, which was the best line, and, you know, comping vocals together, which was kind of a tedious process, but he was going for something. And he'd sit there, you know, he'd have the lyrics written out, and he'd be checking out, you know, one lyric against another, and sometimes like I couldn't figure out on occasion what he was hearing. I mean, what was it about one line that sounded better? And sometimes, you know, he'd listen with his eyes closed, and I'd forget to switch, you know, while this, you know, I just miss it, and he'd know, you know, and I wouldn't even know, but he would know. But again, you know, it's part of that vision, and as, you know, as an artist, I think you have to respect that, and, you know, they're going for something. So, you know, in my involvement, you know, was a facilitator. I mean, my job was to try to get their energy, cram that 10 pounds of sound onto that 5-pound disc, and you know, make it work.
Ready to burn.
the opening guitar from, to Holiday in Cambodia. It's just like so intense. And, then the bass and the drums come in, and then that Jello's vocal, I mean, there really wasn't anything quite like that at the time, especially out of America.
What was funny in Holiday in Cambodia, like the whole thing is awesome. Just describing a pampered, disgusting college student in his dorm room playing John Coltrane records, thinking that he has it so tough. Like, that's brilliant. That's what I got from that song. Kiss ass while you bitch, but your boss gets richer off you. Perfect. I mean, that describes like how the snake of capitalism eats its own tail. In a word, that's genius.
It's fairly easy to take shots at politicians and those sorts of people because they're out there. But it seems that the dead Kennedys were a little more intelligent than that. They actually looked under the surface. They saw this sort of creeping undercurrent of things like cults and thought police, and they brought it to the surface, which I think is really interesting. That I don't think anyone else has ever really done.
you.
Seemed like the Dead Kennedys really thrived on controversy. I mean, although there were lawsuits and, you know, police showed up at their gigs, it seemed that just fueled the band, you know. And I know there was a big to-do over cover art and and band records, but all that stuff just seemed to piss them off more and just sort of renew their fire.
We decided to use that photo, thinking that this is some group from 1964 or something like that broke up, and plus it's public domain because they have photos out there, and so we don't have to worry about it, and we used it. But they sued us, saying they're a good Christian rock group, and the photo was taken in the 70s. And I just said, they looked like that in the 70s? We found out that they had recorded at the Wall of Voodoo Studios at some point. So with that as a bargaining chip, I think we worked out a settlement that went from something like from $1 million down to $3,000, and we'd remove their images. Or their likenesses, that's it. We'd remove their likenesses. And we did. We chopped their heads off.
Efficiency and progress is ours once more. Now that we have the neutron bomb, it's nice and quick and clean and gets things done. Away with the enemy, but no less valued a property. No sense in war, but perfect sense.
I got some pictures of the Conservative Party National Congress and inserted "Kill the Poor" for the Conservative Party convention. We used that very picture as the basis of our advertising campaign. And we ran, and we didn't deliver the actual copy for the ads till right the last half hour. So no one could then come back and say, can you change it? Because there wasn't time to change it. So we delivered them by hand. The deadline was 12. We delivered them at 11:45. So they had to run the ads. We got taken to the Advertising Standards Authority and we got censored. But this whole process took months, and all that happened in the end was I think we got a small fine and we're told that we couldn't run the ads again. But of course, we weren't going to run the ads again because the single had been and gone by that time.
I just look at the example of Reagan pretty much opening the doors of all the mental institutions and letting everybody out on the streets. And that to me is, Kill the Poor is about that. We don't care about the disenfranchised. It's all about taking care of taking care of the rich, taking care of the people that take care of us.
They weren't really saying kill the poor. I mean, they were saying that that's what some of these politicians would secretly like to do.
But there was some right-wing politicians in Portugal that liked to kill the poor because they liked the message. They didn't see the sarcasm.
Although there was Kill the Poor, but it was done in satire, I hope. I always told myself it was satire.
We wanted those people dead.
I always told myself it's just satire, don't worry about it. It's okay.
The song's about neutron bombs. Called Kill the Poor.
everyone in the band actually has respect for the Kennedy family. Dead Kennedys wasn't about their assassinations, it was about the idealism that America had at the time.
It was the end of the dream of America's getting bigger and better, and it was also, you know, the Camelot thing of the Kennedys. It was also the end of the idea that you could trust your government to protect you, and that they were telling the truth to you always.
The current president, you know, according to his religious beliefs, you're not supposed to kill people, but for him, death penalty is okay, and the religious people don't seem to see the contradiction there. The other thing is they're supposed to help starving people. To me, that's a more interesting moral value to discuss than the death penalty, because the death penalty only affects, you know, a couple hundred people. But, you know, being poor and starving and not having health care affects millions.
Well, 25 years from now, if you're 19 now, 25 years from now, you'll probably be, unless you take really good care of yourself, looking somewhat like I do now. And it's not all that bad. You'll get used to it, and you can still do positive, forward things with that.
Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables is a timeless album because you can apply many of those songs to today and it still makes sense.
They were on, you know, one of the, you know, at the spearhead of the movement. You know, anything that's followed since then, you know, like Green Day is, you know, is based. I don't want to say it's derivative, but it's, you know, it's spawned from that seed, you know, and those guys, you know, the Kennedys were the seed.
These guys were not Johnny and Dee Dee Ramone. They were not Steve Jones and Sid Vicious. They were not Paul Simonon and Mick Jones. They were removed from that. They were more heady and more cerebral, but they are theoretically still playing physical music because their music was very, you know, had a lot of sway. They were the opposite of Flipper, say, who they embraced, as they should, because Flipper was great. They were very careful about what they did. They were meticulous. They were fastidious. They weren't sloppy. There were no loose ends flying around in what they were doing, and it shows on their recording.
They were provocateurs, and they were highly politicized. They were really the American Sex Pistols. And you could argue that they were the American originators of hardcore.
It set them apart because there really wasn't too many American bands really addressing politics. You know, American punk was, you know, there might, you know, Black Flag talked about hassles with the police and, you know, rage and being wasted and being a burnout surf skate kid. But, you know, the Dead Kennedys were really up to something completely different.
They just worked. It worked. It all came together. There's an interesting synergy that happens with a group like that. Because I've recorded a lot of other punk bands, and they just didn't have what the Kennedys had in terms of being the real deal, I guess. You know, they were authentic.
show is action. The grace of the Lord saves us. What is this? I don't read newspapers on the stage. Yellow clouds going down, 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 going down, going down, down, so to the clubhouse, and I start hunting for the enemy. That's so country. That's how they find it. Look at my TV. Here it comes. Oh my God. Charles! One, two, three, four. Desperate mind, little gardens grow, they grow very wide, they grow very tall. Why am I alive in Wonderland? By the fence I stand, in another hand. There are many